is there enough uses for it to be 88 million worth of an acres in just the U.S.? Is that
It will be is these markets develop, for instance, fiber. I mean, decortication is a really interesting machine and process, but until textile people want it, cordage people want it, plastics industry people want it, those things
on
are
a
all
large
in
scale?
their absolute infancy.
Yeah,
It just, everybody wants to get in there, but okay, where do I sell it?
yeah,
Well, I don't know. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to, do you want to make rough cordage for something? Do you want to make a textile? A true textile made out of hemp takes several processes to get it to a point where you can weave it into a fabric.
right.
It's a lot more intense than just saying I'm going to decorticate it and I'm going to make a textile. It's not
Right.
ready for that. It's
Yeah.
got to be degummed and cottonized and washed and cleaned. And now you can make it into a filament where you can actually do something
But
with
is it competitive with other products? So,
at some point is a lot of that equipment and fiber, even up into World War II, some of the carding combing processes were done by hand. Well, we don't have the labor availability in Canada or
Yeah.
U.S. to do that by hand for sure. So we're trying to innovate some of that type of equipment because it just flat out didn't exist.
yeah,
We've seen some older machines that would kind of card or comb the material, but before the crop was fed into that, somebody carded it by hand over a big chunk of nails and a board. I went to a museum where they did a lot of cordage, and there's pictures of hundreds of people with boards with spikes in it, and they're taking the stems and dragging it across those spikes to break it up.
yeah,
Well, we can't do that, so now we got to figure out how to do that mechanically.
right.
So we've sunk a lot of time and effort into trying to figure those techniques out, and we're still working on them, and we're somewhat happy with them, but not happy with them.
And because now that next stage where you actually turn it into textiles or whatever, if you can figure that process out, how much easier or more efficient or economic does it make it for the next? Or is there a whole new system that needs to be figured out for that? Is that sort of dated as well?
Our fiber equipment, our goal is to try to get it to a point where it can go into the existing cotton fiber infrastructure.
Okay.
We're not there yet because the fiber length of hemp, cotton is based around a couple of different fiber lengths for upland cotton and Pima cotton. So all the machinery was built around that. The hemp product, our goals of our equipment are longer line fibers, so you can get more strength out of the textile or whatever you want to do with it. You can, we can decorticate them and make a long fiber. You can always cut it down to something. Can't ever make it any longer. So that's kind of how we've been working towards fiber equipment. But we want it to get to where we can seamlessly put it into the existing infrastructure. Same thing with plastics. When they get the herd and they get a true resin pellet that can go into the plastics infrastructure and go into an extruder and make a blown film or a rigid packaging, whatever they want to do with injection molding. Once you can get to that stage and you don't have to completely innovate all of that equipment from scratch, it's going to make a huge change.
Mm-hmm.
But if you got to do that all, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of machinery.
Yeah.
Versus getting it to a point where you can use what you already own.
Yeah.
We like people to use what they have. If we can get something that is a drop-in, for lack of a better term, that's pretty interesting to people.
You can make, you can go, theoretically, there could be a day when instead of chopping down as many trees obviously take longer to replant and to process. There are a lot of uses for hemp that could replace that, and you can grow a new crop every year. That's sort of that long-term term idea. Now with it being legalized, there is as long as the market will accept it, which will come down to price and efficiency and all that, it's really only going to be the technology that'll hold that back from happening. Is that a fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's kind of, if you look at the history, how hemp and marijuana got banned in the U.S., starting with the 1937 Tax Act, and then going back through there, if you read any of the Slickton papers, it got killed because he started decortication because he was worried about deforestation back in the 1900s. So he was a German guy that built equipment, and I'll paraphrase, but he was working with Temkin, the Temkin and Bearing kind of people. Temkin took it out and showed it some of the big shots on the East Coast, and it's an opinion. They said, oh boy, my paper infrastructure. What am I going to do with all my forests, all my paper mill, all my lumber mills? I don't want that stuff out there. So they kind of put it on the back burner, and then finally get when the Tax Act passed, that's what killed it. But it's going to change a lot of perceptions when we can get that back to the point where, yeah, we can quit cutting trees down and use a renewable crop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've got some paper sitting on my desk that's 100% hemp paper, and you can run it through an inkjet printer. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's coming. I mean, people are working on it.
Yeah, I mean, you can get it if you really want to find it.
Mhm.
There is, but not on that mass scale where you
No.
go to the store and it's
And
it's
it's
just
there.
there.
Blended paper, you can find hemp
Yeah.
blended
Yeah.
with whatever, with normal paper infrastructure, but this is 100% hemp paper. It's really slick.